Hi, my name is Carolan. I'm Senior Vice President of Cryptography and Digital Trust with eMudhra.
Hey guys, I'm Spencer Frye. I am the Senior Vice President of our go-to-market strategy here at CertaNext.
Hello and welcome to PodBytes. I'd like to introduce you to Spencer Frye, who's the head of a global go-to-market for eMudhra. And today we're going to talk about certificate lifecycle management and the importance of this. And one of the things I wanted to lead in with is, why do you think that certificates are not being considered in, I would say, cyber risk the way that they should be, and what type of lessons do you think that are revealed from outages that we see in the industry that are relating to that?
That's a good question. So I've been in the industry for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
I think when you talk about PKI and certificates and the role that they're playing, especially as you look at risk and breaches, what's so unique about them is that it's not a mainstream cybersecurity threat. It's not something that a lot of people think about. In fact, most people don't know that it's there because it's quietly in the background. When they do notice it, it's because something bad has happened. Either a certificate's been breached, or it's expired, or it's no longer valid. And so for organizations, it's almost like a panic mode. And that visibility is really tricky, and it has been for so many years because it's just not mainstream. And I think that's where organizations maybe struggle a little bit with identifying how does this play into our overall strategy. And in a lot of cases, it's not a centralized solution. It's really hard to pinpoint which team is responsible. Over the years, we talked to so many different groups within a company who are responsible for certificates. If you talk about a red team or an IT security team, they usually have a very distinct, specific role within an organization. With PKI, it can jump from one organization to the other. I've worked with companies where it's on the procurement team to buy certificates and renew them. So it's just this tricky thing for organizations to really identify, one, where does it live and who's responsible? And then two, because it's not in the forefront of their minds, it's something that just generally slips through the cracks.
And in terms of, thank you for that, Spencer. In terms of the examples or the revelations that are coming from cyber breaches, for example, or are we seeing more security type breaches? Is it like integrity, confidentiality, or mostly availability type impacts that are coming from this?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say it's probably more of the availability, in my opinion, right? I think every organization is going to be a little bit different, but a lot of it's availability. I think for so long, especially in the PKI space, it really has never been an issue of the technology, right? The encryption technology has always been really good, especially because it's always at the forefront, right? We're talking a little bit about PQC now, and that's starting to roll out, and we're already starting to see some of the evolution of that. And so the technology has proven itself over the years. The biggest challenge, honestly, over the years has been human error. It's the lack of renewals. It's not securing specific areas, or the key material gets breached. Those are the types of things that are more of a concern that organizations should be identifying. It's the process and the operations rather than the technology. I'm sure you've probably seen something very similar, right?
Yes, I think the governance is a very important piece around it as well. You know, you need to have the right policies set. You need to find a way to prescribe the responsibilities to the right parties. Accountability needs to be defined in mature operating models, so folk know where the accountability is for certain things, and the responsibilities need to be correctly defined and prescribed to entities. So this is something I would say is very, very important to solve when you're trying to centralize your kind of certificate lifecycle, in addition to using best-in-class tools to get to a more mature level.
Can I ask you a follow-up question on that?
Yeah.
So you and I have actually worked on several programs and projects together where something as simple as documenting CP or CPS, right?
Yes.
So maybe, like, from your examples or from your experience, what have you seen as something as simple as having that in place that can maybe prevent some of these risks?
I think that it's very important, but from what I'm seeing at the moment, so I think that the CP and CPS is very important in regulated type of environments where you need to adhere to standards like ETSI standards, for example, for different regulations. But for enterprise type risk, I think that what people need to do is they need to, first of all, establish a centralized certificate lifecycle policy so that the rules and the expectations are clearly defined.
Yes.
And also it needs to be communicated and sponsored by the right stakeholders in the organization to give it credence and to ensure that it's prescribed across the organization and taken seriously. And then supported with a good, effective operating model, I think that CLM tools can come into play and can actually help to operationalize it in a coherent way. And also the CLM tools can be used in order to ensure that compliance with the policy is being monitored as well, to give you visibility on that,
Yeah.
But
100%.
leading into another question, I think that something that's becoming more of an impact on this now as well is, I would say that the shorter kind of certificate timelines and a hybrid crypto, which means you have more assets to manage, crypto assets to manage, certificates. How do you see organizations struggling with that, at the moment?
I think that there's a lot of challenges that organizations have always faced from the idea of a centralized management, right? You talked about guardrails maybe, where organizations have a little bit of leniency.
Yeah.
And I think for so many years there's been this this concept around the certificates, and now that they're becoming shorter, it's really putting a strain on the individuals that are managing the certificates. So finding ways for them to alleviate some of that burden, especially as we talked about, the biggest challenge for them hasn't been the technology, it's really been the operation, the practices around it, and putting them in a position where they have those guardrails, they have the tools in place. And so it's maybe simple, but it's a complex concept of the CLM, of having really those three distinct functionalities. And we've talked about this, I think, several times. Being able to discover where the certificates are, being able to auto-enroll and generate new certificates, and then provisioning and putting them where they need to be. And when you have that kind of complete structure, it really makes it then easy for organizations to identify, okay, what are the parameters within our scope of work? What do we feel comfortable with? And determining that well before they start to then apply some of these practices. And that's where this flexibility is really important. And it's not something that's only now available to large enterprises with a large PKI team. This is something that can be run in a smaller company with one individual that has that control within those parameters that we can help them identify. And I think that's an important key for them.
Yeah. So if you were to kind of summarize what you would consider to be a solid sort of, I would say a certificate lifecycle management strategy, how would you describe that?
I think those three things are really important, right? I think discovering is by far the most important thing that any organization can do, regardless of their size. And you and I have seen this several times where we'll talk to an organization, they have an idea of what they're using, and then we come in and do a discovery, and sometimes it's 2, 3, 4x of what it is that they thought there was. So that visibility is very, very key. Outside of that, I think another thing that's really important for organizations to identify is the importance of crypto agility, right? I think in a market today, you have to have the ability of issuing certificates from multiple vendors, different types of certificates, and putting yourself in a position where you're not vulnerable to being stagnant. And I think best practices here is to have that agility to be able to issue different types of certificates for different validity periods depending on the specific use case. I think those two are probably the main components that I would probably say are the key for organizations at this point.
And I think also on the policy side, by getting everybody to go through the kind of policy funnel, you're bringing the decentralized sort of approach into a centrally kind of managed and governed approach is very, very important for other things as well. So one of the things that we see quite frequently in the industry as well is actually shadow PKI, for example, where you have operational teams and they think that they have X amount of CAs under their control, and then when the scanning is being performed, you identify many, many different certificates that are signing certificates, and there's a scramble to try to understand who's operating these. Are they authorized? So there needs to be exception processes. There's a whole framework of documentation that needs to be there operationally and from a governance perspective to implement and support the policy, the CLM tooling, and also the roles and responsibilities in an effective operating model to get them all to work together coherently.
And I think what you're saying, it kind of gives us a closed loop in the conversation, right? Going back to this idea of where breaches and risk can come from. I think if organizations can identify exactly what you're talking about and then look internally and identify what are the challenges that they're trying to solve, I think that's the best thing that they can do from mitigating the risk within their organizations.
So for me, this has been a great
Yeah,
conversation.
this is great.
Spencer,
This is
thank
fun.
you very much.
I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to have the honor of doing the interview today. And until the next one, thank you.
Hey, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Spencer.